Shabbat Shalom. Author Henry Miller is credited with saying that chaos is the score by which history is written. And if that's so, if chaos is the score by which history is written, then our biblical history has chaos aplenty. We meet this week's Parsha beginning with a state of absolute confusion. Bedlam is the order of the day. But that's just a continuing part of a story that's been going on now for, in Parsha language, at least several weeks. Let's review for a second, shall we? In Parshat Beha'alotcha, a couple weeks ago, Miriam and Aaron touched off chaos and mayhem in the family by speaking against Moses' leadership. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. The chaos that resulted from that was rupture and illness and a breakage in the family that is healed, of course, when Moses steps up to say, El na refana la, please God heal her now. And even though Miriam is exiled from the camp for a week, she does return and a sense of healing comes about. But we are in a downward spiral of chaos and disruption that continued last week, of course, with the story of the spies. This evil speech of 10 of the 12 spies about the land of Canaan touched off a rebellion and a breakage in the community that leads to a terrible uprising with the people threatening to stone Aaron and Moses. And as time goes in the story and the terrible punishment of that generation needing to stay and die in the wilderness for the next 38 years becomes a hallmark of our Jewish story. Out of chaos comes our history. And then this week, no sooner did we get to the end of last week's Parsha with the imposition of some beautiful mitzvot, many of which we still live by, including putting tzitzit and fringes on the edge of our garments, and a number of other magnificent mitzvot, some of which are still doable, some of which are not, but absolutely beautiful sense of mitzvah and discipline and order. No sooner have we had that than yet again the spiral of confusion and chaos and societal decay rears its head enormously this time, with Korach, Dathan, and Abiram leading a rebellion against Moses and Aaron that literally shakes the ground underneath them. Let's walk for a second in Moses and Aaron and even Miriam's shoes. Miriam just makes a scant 5 appearances in the entire Torah, but let's keep her in our circle of leadership as well. But particularly for Moses and Aaron, let's walk in their sandals for just a moment. I don't think we actually have to lean that far to imagine what it feels like to be surrounded by bedlam and chaos, to be crying out literally for order and discipline. Moses and Aaron continually through this section of the Torah fall on their faces, and it's quite a stunning image if we think about it. Yes, some commentators say, of course, they fall on their faces in prayer, but I think we can imagine them literally falling down under the stampede of hysteria that surrounds them. We absolutely resonate with their desire, particularly Moses's, when he turns to God and says, relieve me of these people, I can't take it anymore. And even God appears at God's wit's end, threatening and then even doing it, threatening to destroy at least a significant segment of the people who are causing this unrelenting chaos. Chaos is the score through which history is written. Now, George Orwell is credited with saying that political chaos is connected directly with the decay of language. And we can ponder that for a while, but I also want to make sure that I mention here that this cycle of chaos begins with Miriam and Aaron questioning whether Moses is particularly special. If you recall, back in Numbers chapter 12, they said, "Has the Eternal spoken only through Moses? Has God not spoken through us as well?" And it's really quite striking that Korach asks almost exactly the same question. In this week's Parshat, chapter 16, just a few chapters later, they combined against Moses and Aaron and said, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Eternal is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Eternal's congregation?" It's easy to condemn Miriam and Aaron and Korach and Dathan and Abiram separately, but actually they ask a very similar question. Who made you, Moses and Aaron, so special? Why do you set yourselves, particularly you, Moses, above the rest of us? Now, it's been pointed out time and again that that's actually a legitimate question. And what Korach actually did was to disseminate quite a false appearance, because of course he was not asking for an egalitarian sharing of leadership roles. He wanted the leadership all for himself. So Korach is guilty on a number of levels, but I think it's really important for us to draw a connection between what Miriam and Aaron ask and what Korach and his followers ask. These words that get spoken have serious consequences. They throw the family and they throw the society into absolute bedlam. But through it all, despite the ground opening up, and that's a powerful symbol we'll come back to in a moment, there is a constant cycle of chaos and order. There is tohu vavohu, the void and chaos out of which God created the universe. And then there is a sense of the Mesader, the one who puts in order. This is a cycle that has repeated itself throughout history. And yes, we find ourselves in a moment of particular chaos, of swirling uncertainty. We are surrounded by mayhem. We may even be participating in it ourselves, and yet we are striving for a greater sense of order. We crave it, we need it, and we are creating it as we experience each day. And that's powerful. We have a basis for it over and over again in our Torah. These narratives here in the book of Numbers taking us through this tremendously dramatic time of chaos, followed by order. And it's a symbol of order to where I wish to take us this morning. It's a little beyond where Rabbi Reuben concluded the triennial reading for today. It's a remarkable symbol with which we may not be quite as familiar as some of the other symbols of peace, such as the rainbow or the dove with the olive branch following the chaos of the flood in Parshat Noach, so famous. But here in Numbers, we have this remarkable scene, Numbers chapter 17, beginning at verse 16. After this fire and plague and the Israelites literally shrieking that the earth will swallow us, they are running around in an absolute panic. And yet, incense is offered, and then something very extraordinary, particularly from a literary sense, begins. It's a wonderful scene. God says to Moses, "Take a staff, have each of the tribal heads bring their staff with their name inscribed on it. Put them in the tent of meeting, and the staff of the candidate whom I choose shall sprout. And I will rid myself," says God, "of the incessant mutterings of the Israelites against you." the evil words that are going forth to create this chaos. And Moses does this, and the next day when he enters the tent of the pact, there the staff of Aaron, I guess no big surprise, but nonetheless, the staff of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted. It had brought forth sprouts, produced blossoms, and borne almonds. Now, I know that not everyone likes almonds, perhaps, but I happen to be an enormous almond fan. Anything almond is wonderful to me, and I love this image. So what is it about almonds at this moment that's particularly soothing? Now, by the way, I do want to draw your attention to a couple of verses later. Doesn't matter, because the Israelites keep on saying to Moses, "Lo, we perish, we are lost, all of us. Everyone who so much as ventures near the Eternal's tabernacle must die. We are doomed to perish." So the people continue on with their chaos, even as this magnificent symbol of natural growth and wonder has been put before them. So we're going to let the people go on with their chaotic runnings about. But God and Moses and Aaron steady their hand on the rudder that is this ever threatening to sink ship known as the Israelites in the wilderness, and they just keep going. There are some wonderful mitzvot and a sense of order again. Are you sensing a pattern? Because there is one as the Parsha draws to its close. But coming back to this symbol of the almond branch, Aaron's staff sprouting almond blossoms, absolutely beautiful. So let's just sit and imagine that for a moment. This almond branch is not accidental at this point. The almond has wonderful significance in its not so few, but just a handful of appearances throughout the Bible. They are marvelous, and we won't look at all of them. But the almond branch is considered a symbol of swift and efficient action. It is the very first sprouting to appear in Israel as winter gives way to spring. We all know that from the song that we sing at Tu B'Shvat, Hashkedia porachat, the almond tree is blooming. And that's a symbol that spring is just around the corner. The almond branch is mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, a Moses-like figure who says to God, "Please don't pick me, I don't know how to speak." And God says, "Jeremiah, I will put words in your mouth. Close your eyes and tell me what you see." And Jeremiah closes his eyes and he says, "I see a staff sprouting with almonds." That's in Jeremiah in the first chapter. His harnessing of that vision of a staff, a symbol of strength, and of course that crosses many cultures, a staff of strength, but not just a staff that sprouts with strength, a staff that's used to beat people into submission, but no, a staff that is growing, that is putting forth a beautiful, fragrant blossom, and then a sustaining, protein-rich, and wonderful fruit symbolized by the almond. That's the kind of sage leadership. That's the kind of growth that can come out of chaos, that has to come out of chaos, and that the Torah assures us will come if we can but quiet ourselves, acknowledge that order and discipline, and yes, a leader is needed. It's not for everyone to be piloting the ship. An orchestra needs to have one conductor of the virtuosi. A movie set ultimately has to have a director for the talented actors that are assembled. There needs to be a leader invested with sagacity, with wisdom, and with the sense of awe of nature, and harnessing the good power of language to move a people from chaos to order. One of the unifying themes in these chapters of chaos is the failure of language. Aaron and Miriam speak against Moses. The spies speak ill, the 10 of them, about the conditions in Canaan. And Korach and his followers speak such incendiary words that the mouth of the earth opens and swallows them. That's the language of the Torah. The mouth of the earth wouldn't have been lost on the biblical audience, literally swallows them up. And in the end, though our translation said, so many perished on account of Korach, the language in the Torah is al devar Korach, because of the word of Korach. Now we'll stretch the imagery of the almond just a little bit because, of course, almonds are also often compared to the shape of an eye. But if you look at an almond, it also looks like a little mouth. And what this Torah portion, what all of these parshiot are reminding us so beautifully is of the power of the word. This image of the almond branch comes to remind us of the potential for harm in our words, but also the great potential for grace and beauty, the power of good that the mouth can offer. Lord Byron was credited with saying that out of chaos, God made a world, and out of high passions comes a people. There is so much passion in these stories. Let us learn to harness our passions for good, to use our words and our mouths for beauty and for holiness, to follow the example of the almond branch that does not hold back when the winter of chaos surrounds it, but bursts forth with beauty, with growth, and with hope. Let us take that example with us as we go to the rest of our week. Please be well. Shabbat Shalom.